to allow a few more people to join. LinkedIn is such an important part of our armory, our kit bag when it comes to career pathways. And that's why I think this particular session is going to be very well attended one way and another. I'll just give it one more minute, Adam, if that's okay with you.
No problem. I'll talk faster if I need to.
Because I can see the names are being admitted the whole time. Okay, I think as it's past the appointed hour, I'm going to kick this session off. I would like to think that you all know me by now. My name is Emma May. My job title at Work Avenue is Director of Operations and Employment. And what that means is that I'm responsible for partially assisting our CEO, Debbie Sheldon, in running the whole of Work Avenue. And it also means that I have responsibility for every service delivery option that we offer our job-seeking clients, our clients who are looking for paid work. So you've heard a lot from me this morning, firstly through my own session, secondly through hosting other sessions and being involved in other sessions. I'd like to welcome someone who we are so pleased and proud to have worked with before, and that's Adam Katz. Now, Adam is something of a LinkedIn sensation, I have to say. Adam, a number of months ago, engaged with us and became part of our landscape and started talking to us and offered to do a webinar for us on the power of LinkedIn from his own personal journey. And obviously, it's a really important topic for us, and we love to have fresh presenters, people who can engage and also tell their own story because, you know, someone who's done it before, it becomes so relevant to hear, and we can all take a bit of inspiration and positivity from that. So we asked Adam to do this session and we started to prepare for it and we went live on our social media. And of course, what we also didn't really think about, but had we have stopped to think about, we would have understood it to be the case, that Adam was also going to publicize the event on his own social media, on his own LinkedIn platform. And the number of signups we had through Adam's presence on digital media, on LinkedIn, absolutely skyrocketed. And what Adam may or may not have known at the time is we had to upgrade half our LinkedIn accounts to be able to accommodate all the people who had signed up for the event. Because being a poor charity, we only had a more basic version of Zoom and weren't going to be able to accommodate everyone at the time. So at the time, Adam, you did us a favor. Thank you very much for that. But Adam is an acknowledged master, I would say, of using LinkedIn to pursue his own job search. As you will see from his own PowerPoint, which he's going to share shortly, he was a pizza delivery boy at some points where he's not doing that anymore. He has a stellar career, which he's going to tell you all about. But really what he's going to do is tell you about how he harnessed the power of LinkedIn to take him from pizza delivery boy to just where he is now. Adam, I hope I've done you justice in introducing you now and the impact you've had on our world in Work Avenue. So it's fantastic to have you back in Work Avenue again as part of our Defining Your Second Career event. The floor is yours, or should I say the screen is yours. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I apologise for costing Work Avenue money. I didn't know that. Not normally where you get involved in charity work. But glad you've upgraded. I'm sharing my screen. I just want to make sure that everyone can see that. Great. Okay. So just first of all, to thank Work Avenue, because I'm going to share the story that I went through back in the last recession, so 2008, 2011, and Work Avenue were a big part of my journey as a job hunter, as sort of setting up businesses in the past. So really admire the work that Work Avenue do, and so just thank you and keep up the great work. And also I'll pause for questions in the middle, just so I can have a breather, and then we'll kind of take some questions at the end. And there are no silly questions. If you've got a question, chances are someone else is thinking the question as well. As a Bruce Lee quote I quite like, which is, a wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer. So please do ask questions. And I'm talking today from two perspectives. So I'm going to share from a personal and a professional experience. I've really lived and breathed this. So from a professional perspective, I've had a career in human resources. I've been involved in setting up recruitment functions. I've undertaken recruitment process reviews, so I really understand how the processes work, what they're set up to do, what they're not set up to do. I've been a hiring manager, so I kind of understand what it's like being a hiring manager, kind of going through all the CVs, sitting in interviews, et cetera. But what most people have signed up to is kind of my own personal experience, which was sort of back in 2008. So I'd been working in an educational charity when the recession came and I was made redundant, and I ended up being out of work for 2.5 years. And so this is the story of how I kind of came through that journey and what LinkedIn did for me. So to be honest, I'd had quite a few setbacks in my sort of journey to that point as well. So with my A levels, I didn't get the A level grades that I needed, that I wanted, that I was capable of. I didn't get onto any graduate schemes because of my A level results. When I was at university, I actually had a job in an HR function, which is kind of what I wanted to do. And I quit that because I had a child on the way, and so I kind of wanted to finish university early. And then obviously that came back to haunt me a little bit. So I had this job. I was working in events and facilities management. It was fine. It was going well. And then after sort of a couple of years of doing that, I thought, I probably want to change career. I actually think I want to do something different. And I was starting to think about what I wanted to do. I decided I wanted to go into human resources. Sort of being a typical millennial, I thought, my mum does human resources. If I don't know the answer, I can go and ask her. I thought that'd be quite a good plan. But then 2008, the economic crash came about, and I was made redundant. But I had quite a positive mindset. I was like, no problem at all. I want to change career. I'm going to go for this. And I very quickly discovered it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I applied for hundreds of jobs throughout this period. To make matters worse, I was living with my in-laws because of my situation. My father-in-law is a mixture of Middle Eastern and South American, so quite love him to bits, but quite a feisty personality. So you can imagine the sort of the emotional pressure that goes with living with your in-laws, not supporting their daughter. And funnily enough, I'd kind of taken on this master's degree. I did this master's degree in human resources to try and make that transition, and it actually ended up snookering me a little bit because I'd had a sort of a manager job title in this previous role in doing something completely different, and now I had a master's degree. So that was telling people, this is the level that I'm at. But actually, when it came to my actual work experience, I didn't have any direct relevant work experience. So when I was going for the sort of the more junior level end of the jobs that I could go for, I wasn't getting those because they saw me as being too qualified and overqualified. And, I wouldn't, so I was kind of too qualified for those jobs. But then when I went for the more senior roles, they would turn around and say, well, actually, you don't have enough relevant experience. So I ended up kind of completely snookered. And a lot of you might be in a similar situation in terms of suddenly finding yourself on the job market, potentially having to change career. And I was told, Adam, you need to network. So I always knew I had to network, but I'm a bit of an introvert, so I wasn't really a fan of networking. If you imagine sort of the typical network events, I'm the sort of person, or even going to a wedding, I'm sort of hiding behind my wife because I don't like those big group dynamics. If I'm going to networking events, when before COVID, I'd be the person at the food buffet, at the drinks cart, pretending to be busy so I didn't have to talk to anyone, putting on quite a bit of weight at these events, which was never a good thing. But I just didn't like those networking events. I didn't like talking to people. I tried networking through sort of friends and family. So as I mentioned, my mum was working in human resources. That was an area I wanted to go, and she had a bit of a network. So I tried accessing her network, and people did meet with me, but it didn't really go anywhere. And it felt like they were doing my mum a favor than they were doing me a favor. But networking really is important. That's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And there's a saying from someone called Harvey Mackay, which is dig the well before you're thirsty. And that comes down to networking. You need to have a powerful network to tap into so that you can access opportunities, access jobs. But I was in a pickle. I didn't have a network, and I was thirsty now. I needed to get something now. And again, chances are, if you're on this webinar, that you might be in a similar situation. It might be you've again found yourself on the job market, and you might need to change career, and you don't have a network in that new career. And so I had to quickly figure out, how do I build up a network from scratch in a short space of time? And it's not about getting it perfect. You're not going to get it perfect. But it's very important that when you go down this path, you take imperfect action, and you course correct. Like the first time we do anything, we're not good at it. The first time I had a network meeting, I wasn't good at it. By the end, I was very good at it. The first time I played football, I was terrible at it. Now I'm, by the 100th time, I'm much better at it. I was listening to the eulogy of Rabbi Sachs, one of the eulogies the other day. And I can't remember, one of the people who's giving the eulogy said, actually, he's known him for a very long time. And when he started out, he was not a good speaker. He was a terrible speaker the first time. But actually, because he practiced, because he did it, because he refined it, he was able to change and able to develop the skills over time just by practice. And again, I came across another saying the other day, which is an inch of movement goes a lot further than a mile of intention. An inch of movement goes a lot further than a mile of intention. So start taking action, course correct. You'll make mistakes. You'll learn from those mistakes, and you'll improve on this journey, and you'll kind of improve your network skills as you go on. So I kind of want to share some of the foundational principles that I learned on my journey, as well as sharing what specifically that I did on that journey. And I really like this quote: "The harder I work, the luckier I get." As I said, you'll make mistakes in your job search. You will get rejections. I got rejections. I went for network meetings. I knew within 30 seconds to a minute that this was going to be a very difficult half hour. It's an applicant heavy market. It's the chances of you actually successfully landing a job through the normal recruitment process, i.e. submitting a CV on a job site is actually less than 2%. So I think according to Glassdoor, there's about 250 applicants per role on average. Again, just do the maths. That's less than a 2% chance of success if you have the exact experience that they're looking for, because they have something called the applicant tracking system, which is designed to filter out just the vast volume of people that are applying for the roles. So again, you will meet people, you'll make mistakes, you'll mess things up. I made plenty of mistakes. Like I said, I met with people, those meetings didn't go well. I never had to speak to that person again. I'm dyslexic. I made spelling mistakes in my CV. It was funny. I was actually looking back at all the last 3 jobs I've got. I was looking over the CVs I submitted. I made spelling mistakes in every single one of them. But because I was kind of taking a slightly different approach, and I had the relationship before I was applying, that just kind of wasn't relevant at all. And again, just to kind of re-emphasize the point, I came across another great saying, which I really liked, which is stay focused on the windscreen, not the rear view mirror. Stay focused on the windscreen, not the rear view mirror. Things happen, bad things happen. I was made redundant. I was let go. And it's hard. It's very tempting. It's very easy to hold on to the pain and the blame, as it were, of those situations. Why did that company let me go? Maybe I should have taken a different career choice. Maybe I should have moved earlier. All these things, they might be true, but holding on to them, you're looking behind you. Really, you need to you need to look ahead. And it reminds me of a story that I heard, which is how did they capture the first monkeys into captivity for the zoos? Random story, but hopefully it'll demonstrate the point, which is the way they set the traps up to capture these monkeys in captivity. They'd have a little trap, and it was big enough for their hand to go in, and inside this trap were a bunch of nuts. So the monkey would put their hand in, grab the nuts, but then it wasn't big enough to pull their hand out. All they needed to do was to let go of the nuts, and their hands, and they would have been free. They were free the whole time. But because they were holding on, because they wouldn't let go, they were trapped. And that's the first thing that I found that I needed to move past. So I needed to let go of the things that had happened to be able to move forward. And again, you need to take constant action. You need to move forward. The more action you take, the more of the right activity you do, the more opportunities you'll create for yourself, which hopefully will become a little bit clearer as we go ahead. So the second sort of foundational principle that I found really useful was to get focused. To get focused. So again, as I told you in an earlier slide, as I said earlier, I was living with my in-laws. My father-in-law was just saying, you need to apply for anything and everything. Anything and everything. The more you apply for, the more jobs you can get. And in principle, that seemed right, but I'll explain why that didn't really work actually on the next slide. But part of getting focused is you want to tell a story. You want to tell a story, and it feels a bit strange. Why is telling a story so important? What's that relevant? Why is that relevant for my job search? Storytelling is so deeply rooted in the human psyche. I think there's a theory, I think it's Christopher Booker, if I'm not mistaken, who said there's actually only 7 human stories which go across time, they go across culture, and storytelling is how humans have transferred information throughout millennia, throughout the generations. And so if you're able to tell a good story, you can really tap into this psyche and really build very strong, powerful connections in a very short space of time. And at the heart of telling a good story is having a goal. Having a goal creates a journey of where you've come from and where you're moving towards. So how did I go about sort of creating that goal? And actually, if you think about it, imagine a football game without the goals, it would look very different. The reason you have the goals is to move forward, is to make progress. Again, I set some goals for myself during this journey, which was I want to go and do X. And actually, I've never managed to achieve that original goal. But by having the goal, it enabled me to move forward, to take the right actions, to move in the right direction. And actually, it opened up opportunities which were much more interesting to me and things that I hadn't really thought about and things that I hadn't really expected. So goals are there to create momentum. It's about creating a journey and about telling a story. So how did I go about doing that? So essentially, I sat down and I asked myself 3 questions. The first question was, if I had a magic wand and I could do anything, what would I do now? And again, for some people, it might be, if you're in this situation, it might be a slightly different question, which might be, I can't do exactly what I want, but what's the next best thing that I can do? For some of you, it might be, actually, I've been thinking about doing something different for a while. Now's an opportunity to think, if I could do anything, what would I do? So if I had a magic wand, if I had a realistic magic wand, what would I do? And some of the things you need to think about for that are, what am I good at? What am I interested in? What are my values? What skills and capabilities do I need to do that role? What organizations and sectors match up? So even in today's market, there are industries and sectors which are absolutely booming. Maybe there's opportunities there to go to explore. Go and have a look in some of those industries. You can do some online research, keywords research on LinkedIn, for example. You can find really interesting topics to talk about that people are talking about, really interesting things that are going on, and you might find things that interest you which you might not have expected. So that's the first one. If I had a magic wand and I could do anything, what would I do? The second question is to figure out, where am I now? So what skills and experience do I have now? What technical skills do I have? What transferable skills do I have? What have I gained from outside of formal work settings? So it might be volunteering. Some people, one of the things that I did during this time was try to do a little bit of sort of freelance consulting work, and that's something that can be really effective. And the third is to bring it to life, which is, how do you bridge the gap? So again, you've got your goal, you've kind of got where you're going, where you are now, and what's that journey you need to go on. So what organizations and sectors and jobs match up to what I want to do? And what can I do now to plug that gap? For example, the volunteering, doing those freelance consulting projects, trying to start your own business is another way that you can gain experience, even if the objective is not to start that business, but just to gain the experience that you need to make that transition. That can be a really effective way to do it. What are the steps to take me from here to where I need to go? One of the things that I found really powerful is to reach out to people who've made similar journeys. So you can use LinkedIn to research and find people who have kind of come from similar organizations to where or careers to where you are now, and have made a transition to where you want to go. Reach out to those people, ask for advice, which I'll come on to. But those are really good people to learn from. And then what sideways moves do you need to take? As the talk is called, I went from pizza delivery boy to PwC. I took on a job as delivering pizza while starting up a business for my wife. And it's not the pizza delivery role. It wasn't something that it was just something to bring in some extra money. But actually, it became a key reason why I got my job at PwC. It's something I talked about in the interviews. I talked about it in my CVs. And so unexpectedly, it became a really powerful tool. Those little sideways moves, which I wasn't expecting, became that tool for getting the job that I wanted. Next foundational stage for me is, as I say, get organized, focus your job search. And this is kind of what I was talking about a little bit before. When I was living with my father-in-law, he was saying, Adam, just apply for anything and everything. You just need to get something. And it feels logical. The more types of jobs you apply for, the more opportunities you're going to have to find something that works and find something that lands. Again, it feels logical. The problem is it's just not true. It's just not true. That's called the spray and pray effect and approach, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for two reasons. One, practicality, and two, effectiveness. So practicality, imagine you've got 10 types of jobs that you're applying for. That means you've got to now prepare 10 different types of CVs, and you've now got to prepare 10 different types of interviews. And you're left with a choice. Either you're going to do a generic application, which doesn't get you anywhere. Work Avenue would have told you need to tailor your approach for each application. So either you're going to do a generic approach so you can apply for a large number of roles, or you're going to spend the time tailoring your CVs, tailoring your interviews, and do interview prep, and you're physically able to apply for less roles. So that's the first reason. It's very practical. You just can't apply for as many roles in the way you need to for using the spray and pray technique. The second principle is the second reason is it's just not effective. As I told you, as we talked about, storytelling is really, really important. And if you're applying for 10 different types of roles, you're now telling 10 different types of stories. And for example, if you're in an interview, that can just really slow things down. You've got to put in that more prep. You don't come across as fluent. You're not as convincing. You need to be really convincing in a small area for people to take a chance on you, especially in a candidate-heavy market. If you're imagine you're sitting on the other side of the table, you're going to be getting dozens, potentially hundreds of applications. How are you going to stand out? You're not going to stand out by having a generic answer. You need to really focus in and tell your story convincingly. And the way you do that is to focus on a small number of things that you want to do and really go for it. I suppose you could call it, you're going a mile deep and an inch wide rather than a mile wide and an inch deep. So that's a really, really important principle. You'll become much more effective. And then the second sort of organizational hack, if you like, that I used was to have a master CV and a master cover letter. So what I would do is I'd have one really, really long CV, which had literally everything I'd ever done and could ever have in it. And again, I'm not going to go into how to structure your CV because that's something that Work Avenue can support you with. But I literally put everything and anything on there that was relevant. And then when I was applying for each role, what I would do is I would then go through it and I would cut out all the things that weren't relevant. And it's really important when you do this as well. So I'd have this sort of 4 or 5 page CV, cut it down to 2 pages because it's much easier to delete information than it is to write new information. So that was just really, really helpful. But it's really important that you use their words that they're using. So look at the job description for the role you apply for, find the keywords, and make sure that even if you're talking about the same thing in a different way, change your words so that you're using their words. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is a lot of companies use applicant tracking software, and that is a piece of artificial intelligence software which scans your CV and rejects people based on certain criteria. And one of the criteria is how does your CV match up to the keywords? So making sure you've got the right keywords in there is really, really important. The second reason is when you get to interviews, and again, I know this when I was, well, not even interviews, when my CV was then in front of an HR manager or the hiring manager, when I was going through CVs as a hiring manager, it wasn't my most enjoyable task. And I would go to looking for keywords and start skim reading. And on average, CVs are actually read for about 6 to 10 seconds. So having those keywords is really important for making a high impact. The third third principle is about networking. This is where I'm going to start moving into specifically what I did. But just some foundational principles. I'm not going to talk through them all now, but the ones I want to focus on are actually listen more than you talk. Listen more than you talk when you're networking with people. And the reason that is really important, I'm going to use another psychological experiment. So I did a psychology degree. One of the benefits of doing a psychology degree is you can refer to these psychological experiments or talk about human nature and pretend you know what you're talking about. So this is a psychological experiment that was done where they took two strangers and got them to speak to each other for about 15-20 minutes. And then they measured how long each person spent talking and how long each person spent listening. And then afterwards, the participants were asked to rate how much did you like the other person. Now, what you might expect is the person who spoke more, the person who spoke less would like the other person more because they'd had an opportunity to learn more about the other person. But actually, it was the other way around. The people who spoke more liked the other person more. And the reason is because they felt listened to and they felt validated. So it's a really important principle for you to tap in when you're networking, when you're meeting with people. Ask good questions, get them to talk, because the more they talk, the more they will like you. And the more they'll feel, the more they will like you. And then the second principle I'm going to talk about is look for ways to add value. So one of the analogies I like to use is, you wouldn't go on your first date, imagine you're going on a blind date, you wouldn't start as your opening line, say, right, when are we getting married and what are we going to call our children? That's, it's quite a cringy thing to think about doing that. But it's the same with your networking. I see a lot of people do is, can I have a job? What opportunity? I'm interested in this job. That's kind of, you haven't built the relationship yet. You haven't invested in the relationship. You haven't built the trust yet. And you need to find ways to add value to help other people. I saw a really great example of how someone did this on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, which was there was this student who really wanted an internship in a tech startup. And they'd kind of tried applying, they tried sending sort of generic messages to various people, and they got absolutely nowhere. And so what they did actually is they then went and surveyed 15 to 20 of that company's customers and said, what do you like about the app? What do you like about this company? What don't you like? And then put together a little proposal that said, I've done a survey of your customers. This is the problem that you have, and this is the opportunities that you're missing. It'd be great to have a conversation. Lo and behold, within 24 hours, he had a meeting with the CEO of this tech startup. So that's just an example of how you can look for ways to add value before you then go into a conversation around what jobs are available. Actually, before I go on to the next section, Emma, it might be a good time to pause, see if there are any questions that people have at this stage before I kind of go into what specifically I did. Oh, you're on mute, Emma.
Apologies for that, everybody. Classic Zoom. I have had a couple of questions. The first one is from Jonathan, and he says he's a well-established gig economy consultant with 4 legs in different sectors, and those sectors being marketing, mentoring, mediation, and management consultancy. He's very into his M's. How do I prevent me being seen on LinkedIn as a jack of all trades? And he says, can one have different LinkedIn accounts focusing on each area of speciality?
That's a good question. It's an interesting question. It's actually something that I struggle with my LinkedIn profile, because I've got 2 or 3 things that I want to do for professionally. So in a sense, I've made a decision which one I want to focus in. So there's no one right answer to that. But what I would say is, from your LinkedIn presence, if you're going to be active, you might say that actually right now there's more opportunity in one of those spaces or 2 of those spaces. But start talking to people, start putting out content, start engaging in conversations to show your expertise in those areas. If you feel like you're trying to do all 4 and it's not landing, or you need to speak to too many different people, and actually you're better off focusing on 1 or 2 and narrowing your profile down temporarily to make progress, that can be a good approach.
Thank you. Now, I've had a question, or at least Jilly would like to ask a question, but she said she can't use the chat for some reason. So Jilly, if I could ask you to unmute yourself and ask Adam your question now. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me, Adam?
I can.
Oh, good. Hello. Thank you for unmuting. Yes, I use voice activated software and I can't actually speak to the screen while I'm talking to you. It's the technology isn't working at the moment. I just wanted to ask you, I was on your last Work Avenue session some months ago, which was
I remember.
thank you very, very much indeed. And I have been trying to build my work network on LinkedIn, and yes, I've got quite a lot of people, but I was specifically trying to look in one area. I guess this sort of covers over the other person's question, which is about, you know, being a jack of all trades. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I was trying to build up a lot of contacts in the publishing world because that's the one that I was working in. But it's become quite obvious to me that I'll be extremely lucky if I get another job in that world again. So I'm just trying to build contacts with just about everybody I know, because I think it was David Kaplan who said this morning, once you get to 500 people or more, then the algorithms really, really start to work. I'm just wondering, I don't yet know actually what area I'm going to be working in next. I'm looking at different areas, but obviously I don't want to have a scattergun approach. What would you suggest if I'm, you know, if I don't yet know exactly what it is? Shall I just keep building and building and hope that through that I'm going to reach the right people who can help me? Yeah, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a good question. What I would say is research is really, really important. And that's what I was talking about a couple of slides ago. You know, start doing research, start looking up in specific industries. So you might have some ideas now. And again, kind of like if you, for those of you who are like me, who kind of go through YouTube and just scroll through and end up watching all sorts of random videos, you can actually kind of go through your history and kind of see what you've been scrolling through and what you're watching, you know, just to see what you're interested in when you're mindlessly not thinking about things. Or there might be some things that actually you know that you're interested in, and you can start doing research. You can look up specific companies, you can look up industry magazines or industry publications to kind of find out what are the key trends in there. And part of your networking strategy can be, I want to speak to someone to learn more about the industry. You know, that's perfectly reasonable. And it might be you have a conversation with someone, so you reach out and go, hi, Mr., Mrs., Miss X, whatever it is. I'm really interested. Came across your profile while looking in like researching this industry. You look like a really interesting. You look like you've got a really interesting background. It'd be great to learn more about it if that would be okay.
Yes. Okay.
And then through those conversations, you might actually go, actually, this is something I'm really interested in. Or it might be, you know, actually having spoken to people who actually live and do it, I can rule that out. And you know, that's great. You're one step closer. You've ruled something out, and you can go and start focusing on something else.
Okay, and do you think it's better to do that individually than actually just put a post there saying, I'm looking in this area, can I speak to somebody? It's better to actually look for a specific person.
Yeah, so in terms of engaging, I would start reaching out to specific people. What the other thing you can do is you can start jumping in on other people's posts. So people who are talking about it, you can start engaging conversations that way, and you know, the relationship's a little bit warmer if for example, if you've joined a LinkedIn group in the right an industry that you're interested in, or a career that you're interested in. Start those conversations, see what's going on, and then once you start speaking to someone, you can then, you know, you're not sending a cold connection request. It's now a warm connection request because you've spoken to them already.
Okay, thank you very, very much. I think I'll mute again now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julie. Very interesting. And Johnny has asked, can you talk about hashtags and content?
Johnny, what specifically do you want to know about hashtags? Maybe unmute yourself.
Hello, sorry about that. A million one things in my life. Okay, so when it comes to hashtags, I regularly post, but I don't seem to be getting the right amount of network effect. And I want to know your advice on what hashtags, and also when you start to type them up, you can see there are options. How do you know which one is most relevant? And the other thing about content is Gary Vaynerchuk, he says there's no such thing as bad content, just no content. But my question is how often and regular do you advise?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and the answers will be depends what your objectives are, but some underlying principles for that. So hashtags, until recently, I think the LinkedIn algorithms changed recently, so people are kind of still trying to work it out. But optimally, 3 hashtags was kind of the optimal from a LinkedIn perspective. Now people say it's kind of 3 to 10, but I personally still wouldn't use more than 5, just because it looks a little bit spammy to have that many hashtags. And again, you want to be doing your research in terms of what hashtags to use. So you put in some keywords, under, use the hashtag, do some searches under there, and see what comes up, see how many people are following a particular hashtag. But actually, probably more important than that is engaging on other people's posts when you're starting out. So LinkedIn will reward, there's a principle called relevance in terms of LinkedIn. So if LinkedIn won't show your content to everyone you're connected with or everyone who follows you. They'll only show it to the people they think are most relevant. So the way you build relevance are people you're connected with, people you've exchanged a direct message with, people you've recommended, people you follow, and I can't remember what the other one is, and people whose content you've engaged with. So you want to spend some time before you start posting. You actually want to find some target people who are relevant to the area you're interested in and start engaging in their conversation on their posts. So start commenting on other people's posts who are relevant to you, start engaging with people in the comments, and do that for a couple of weeks. You can do sort of 10 messages a day that way, but that will start to warm you up so that when you post, then those people, your posts will start to show up in those people's feeds, and they'll be warmer because they know who you are. And that way you can start to build traction.
A few people have sort of responded to the question about hashtags by asking what hashtags are and how do you use them? But I think you've kind of covered that a little bit. And
in terms of what I'm going to talk about today, there's different ways you can use LinkedIn. One of it is around creating content. When you come to creating content, at the end of the day, a good post will do well. And a bad post will do badly. Again, I'm not going to go into creating content today, but I'm going to talk more about how there's different approaches. One is kind of the more marketing stuff, which is you put content out there, you set up your profile right, and that's about being found by the right people. And then there's what I'm talking about, which is being much more direct and using the sales approach. That actually might be a good time for me to kind of move on to the next part.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. It's in case you're not following, Adam, it's 20-1 now, so you have 20 minutes left. So
plenty of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next bit, and then we'll pick up questions again at the end. So as I said, I absolutely hated networking. I'm very much an introvert. It's going to these networking events just did not sit well with me. I'd hide behind my wife at weddings, etc., etc. So I used to think, actually, I'm a terrible networker, and it actually sapped my confidence because of going to these events, knowing what I needed to do, knowing that actually I can talk to people. I'm quite good at talking to people, but these sort of big networking events just didn't really work for me. And actually, there's a book by someone called Susan Cain called Quiet. It's one of my favorite books, and it talks about how actually naturally introverts are better networkers than extroverts. Which was quite surprising to me, because I envisaged networking as kind of these big events, working the room, etc., etc. And again, that's not to say that extroverts don't possess these qualities, but if you think about the qualities that are important for networking, you more traditionally associate with introverts. Think about people listening, the ability to think about feelings and to empathize with other people. So again, not exclusive to introverts, but much more commonly associated with introverts. And again, come back to storytelling. So Christopher Booker and his 7 human stories, it's really primed into the human psyche. So I decided I was going to kind of tap into this, and I was going to start approaching people directly, and start to try and tell a story around why I'm connecting. And so the way that I did that was I would ask for advice. I'd be when I'm approaching people, I'm looking at positioning them as an expert, in a sense, stroking their ego. Yes, you're an expert, and they sit there. Yes, I am an expert. That's right. I am. I like this person. I'm gonna go and talk to them. And so, this is now the process, kind of how I did that. And again, I call it research like a headhunter, because I did actually spend a time as a headhunter, a very brief period. And essentially, all I did was take the process that headhunters do, and I applied it to my job search. So I reversed it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to join relevant groups. So Gilly, this kind of comes back to your question, which is, how do you start finding people who are the right people to talk to? And so LinkedIn, the way it works, it will show you your first degree connections, people you're directly connected with, their connections and their connections. So it'll only show you a certain number of people, and anyone beyond that, LinkedIn's not going to show you. So one of the ways you can get around that is to join relevant groups. So for example, I wanted to work in human resources, so I joined HR groups. I wanted to work in sort of one of the big 4 accounting firms, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, Ernst & Young. And so I joined groups that were relevant to them. And so now suddenly all these different people are now within my network. And again, I've kind of talked about this with the question. You can combine this activity with other activities, and about posting on LinkedIn, about using recruiters. And yeah, this is very much the sales part of the process. So yeah, so by joining groups, you're increasing the reach, you're increasing the number of people that LinkedIn is showing you. And again, you want to interact with relevant content, but the most important thing for me is being really targeted with your search. So I decided, again, I want to work for one of these 4 companies. So I went onto LinkedIn. Once I joined the relevant groups, and again, the more you engage in people's posts, the more the LinkedIn likes you. And I said, I want to work for one of these companies. So I literally went on the search feature, did PwC, London, HR manager, because I wanted to work in HR. And a list of about 100 people came up. And again, one thing I would emphasize is, in general, unless you want to work in HR is not your friend here. HR is not your friend. The whole reason for HR's existence in this case is to manage the process and to curate the candidates that the hiring manager actually speaks to. So bear that in mind. Unless you want to work in human resources, don't focus on HR people. So I'd come up with a list of 100 people, and I'd send a personalized invitation to connect with them. And just to give you an idea of numbers, so 100 people, I'd send this message to. About 20 to 30 would accept the invitation. I'd probably end up having a conversation on LinkedIn with about 15 to 20 of them. And then I'd actually end up going for a meeting with about 7 of them. So again, it doesn't feel like a particularly high response rate. You're messaging 100 people and actually you're only speaking to 7 people. That doesn't feel very good. But actually, those are the people who are most likely to help you. And this is a principle I actually learned from email scammers. So the way email scammers work is they'll send out tons, like thousands and thousands of really poorly written emails. And the reason they do that is because they don't want everyone to respond. They only want the people who are most susceptible to their scam to respond. And again, this is just reversing that. You want the people who are going to respond to you are the people who are most likely to help you. And there's lots of reasons why people might not help you. Might be they're not active on LinkedIn. It might be that they're just really busy at that particular moment in time. But the people who do respond to you will have the time and the inclination to help you. And so those are the people you want to speak to. And those 5 to 7 people who I've spoken to are now 5 to 7 new relationships, which I didn't have before. And again, with Jilly's question, I kind of started talking about this with the approach, with the message. You don't want to make it about you. You don't want to go asking for a job, because if there's no job, and again, you've got no relationship, you've got no credit in the bank with them. They don't know you from Adam. I'm Adam, but they don't know you from Adam, and they've got no reason to respond to you. So you need to find a way to build the relationship, and that's things like asking for advice, again, positioning them as an expert, finding an angle, particularly if you're looking to change career. One of the things I said you can do, in the search feature, you can add in people who have worked in companies you've worked in, or in sectors that you've worked in, or similar companies, and now work in the company that you want to work for. They will then come up in your search, and you can ask them, I noticed you made this transition, I'd be really interested in learning about that transition. And those people, again, because they've had a slightly more unusual journey, they tend to be more inclined to share their journey. But again, you want to be asking these people for advice, and you're building the relationship up. You're not going in straight away asking for a job. You're looking to establish the relationship. And again, touching on Johnny's question, one of the things you can do in terms of engaging in other people's content is another way of connecting with people and finding new people to engage with. And again, warming up the relationship before you started to reach out to them. So again, conscious of time, but just to talk a little bit about why this works. So another psychological experiment that they did was in the 1970s. They gave some participants a really boring activity to do. It was something like winding a lever up for about 20 minutes. One group, they paid $20, which was a lot of money back then, and the other group, they paid $1. The group they paid, then they asked them a question: did you enjoy the activity? And the people who were paid $20 were like, no, not really. I did it for the money. The people who were paid $1 were like, yeah, actually, it was quite an enjoyable activity. It was good, etc., etc. The reason being is the way the human brain is wired is to look for rewards. We don't like to think I did this for no reason. So the fact that they've done something without a tangible reward means that they internally start to look for reasons why they're doing it. So people love helping other people, and again, this approach is going to help you find the people who are most likely to help you. But by creating these kind of smaller rewards, those people actually end up wanting to help you and like you a lot more. And the other reason is if they start to give you advice, and then you act on that advice, they're now invested in you. If you're successful, that's partly down to their advice. So by giving you their advice is now embedded in you. And if you're successful, that's a good reflection on them. So now you're creating all these psychological reasons why people become invested in your success. And again, I said it's a numbers game. You need to you want to be targeted. So I talked about spray and pray, but once you're targeted, once you found 10, 15 organizations you want to work for, go really deep. Send a lot of messages to those people in your target market, in your target organization, your target career. Again, not HR unless you want to work in HR, and send a lot of messages. Again, because it is a numbers game. If you've got, let's say, so my response rate was 30% people would come back to me. If I'm only sending 10 messages, I'm only having 3 people come back to me. If I'm sending 100 messages, I'm having 30 people come back to me. So it's just going really deep and scaling it up. And again, in terms of the way it works, again, the more you do this, the more people you take this approach with, the more people you have liking you, the more people you have rooting for you, the more people you have gunning for your success. And so you're building up this whole network around you of people who are invested in you succeeding in your job search. So the way it happened for me is one of the first people I approached was someone called James, who worked at PwC. And I met with James. It was meeting was absolutely fine. Established a relationship. And then I followed up with him a couple of weeks later. And he said, "Oh, we're recruiting. Why don't you apply?" Now, if I'd applied directly on the website without James, I would have been screened out. And this is why I say you avoid HR. HR is not your friend. HR's role is to screen you out. Their job is to curate the relevant candidates so that the hiring manager is only looking at the most qualified candidates. But because James had now referred me in, they now say, "Oh, if James trusts him, we can now have a look at him." And I've kind of bypassed this whole process. So again, you've got the online application, you've got a piece of AI software filtering you out, you've got the HR level filtering you out based on a 6 to 10 second CV review. But now, because I've got someone referring me in, I've bypassed all of that and I'm going straight to the interview stage. So it's a really, and actually the way it works out for me was James ended up being on the interview panel, and also PwC had a referral scheme. So he was going to get a referral bonus if I got the job. And a lot of companies do have a referral bonus. Again, particularly the larger organizations will have referral bonuses. But again, if they don't, that's fine as well, because you've kind of got these psychological principles at play as to why they're invested in helping you. And again, the whole hiring decision is really risky for an organization. If they get it wrong, it's going to cost them thousands of pounds, lost 6 months, up to lost productivity, potentially even longer. So they really need to make sure that they're getting it right. It's a big deal for them to get the hiring decision right. And by building these relationships up, so I had James vouching for me, and the hiring manager, the hiring team, they already trust James. So now someone who they trust is saying, "Here's a good person who for the job. I've already got credits in the bank before I even get to the interview stage. I'm already ahead of the pack, even at the interview stage, just by doing that approach." And again, the beauty of the approach is you don't have to get it right every time. I'd go to a meeting and it would go terribly, and I knew within 30 seconds to a minute, this meeting is going to go nowhere, this relationship's going nowhere. You know what? I never had to speak to that person again. Never had to speak to them again, and that was absolutely fine. But then I'd reflect, go, okay, why didn't that work? What didn't work? What can I do differently next time? And the more I did it, the more fluent I got at my interview pitch. And so by the time I got to interviews, I was so fluent because I'd had so many of these conversations. I could have been thinking about that weekend's football, and I could still answer the questions really, really well.
Adam, I was going to say we actually have about 5 minutes left.
Yes, I was literally just going to say I will. Let's go to questions.
Yeah, we do have a few on the chat. So Caroline has asked, how do you promote your current company while preparing for your next role in a different field? What type of posts do you advertise that build your personal brand, yet are centered on your current company, especially if different fields?
So maybe Karen, can you come off mute? Can you just tell me a little bit more about what your current company is, what you're doing for them on LinkedIn? Is that part of your job to kind of promote content for them on LinkedIn? Are
you still there, Caroline? Well, if she's not, we can move on to some other questions. Caroline, if you are there, let me know and we'll come back to that. Janine has asked, when you have your conversations with people you wish to connect with, how can this be private without other people seeing your conversations?
So there's a couple of different ways. So essentially, LinkedIn has a private direct message feature. So you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can invite them to connect with this personalized message. Again, some people respond, some people won't. You can engage them if they're active on LinkedIn. You can look to engage them in the comments on their posts, etc., so that by the time you send them the connection request, they know who you are and they're more likely to accept. And then you can exchange messages in that direct message feature. But interestingly, also there's sort of email lookup software. So you can use email lookup software to try and work out what people's email addresses are, and then you can try emailing them directly as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. Adele has asked, should you exchange emails with LinkedIn contacts, even if it is just small talk or making a contact with no need for anything more? So
I would say, especially if you're looking to build up a sort of a powerful network at the moment, again, the whole idea is you want to open the door and establish a relationship. So whether that's on exchanging messages on LinkedIn or moving the conversation to email, that's kind of going to depend on what the other person wants to do.
Okay, and we have just got some more questions. Daniela has asked, I was made redundant on maternity leave and looking to now move careers. Should I pose the flexibility chat with employers?
So again, the way that I personally think it's most effective is to, again, establish the relationship, establish your value, so that you know that they want you. If you're putting the question up there up front, that's a reason for them to kind of say no straight away. Again, even if legally they can't, it's making the conversation about you. So the primary focus of your relationship building is to show how you can add value to them. What are their problems? What are their issues? What do you bring to the table? Once you've established, for example, through a formal offer, that they want you and they recognize your value, I think that's the point to start talking about flexibility. So I was speaking to an old friend of mine called Anna recently, who had a similar challenge, which is they were full-time, but actually they wanted to work part-time, and they had certain other things they wanted to talk about. But first they established the relationship. First they established that they wanted the other company wanted them to work for them, and then they had the maneuverability to say, actually, can the work arrangement look like this?
And the final question is from a delegate on this programme who says, what if we don't feel safe networking online and don't want to be Googleable? And some people have had personal circumstances where that may be the case, not wanting to put themselves out there because someone might find them. She's asked it slightly differently, but is LinkedIn safe for women?
So it's as safe as any social media network. Again, if you put anything out online, it's there for all to see to an extent. What you can do, you don't have to post content, and you can just take the approach of trying to directly reach people and directly message people. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, for 99% of careers, you are significantly missing out on an avenue, and you need to balance the risks and the rewards. Yeah. Do you want to take the advantages and the opportunities that LinkedIn comes, or do you say, actually, I'm prepared to forego those and rely on sort of less effective methods for the sake of that protection? That's a very personal decision, and I'd probably say compared to other social media networks, you get less strange people, but you do still get some strange people on LinkedIn.
I'm going to have to bring this session to a close now. That was absolutely magnificent, Adam. I thank you very, very much. The reason I'm bringing it to a close is because we have to start the closing session, which is starting literally in 1 minute's time. So I thank you all for joining this, and I hope you'll all join me. Adam, amazing as ever.
And very quickly, I'll join this Q&A session, and if anyone has any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we can pick up the conversation there as well.
Much appreciated. See you all in a second.